On the Western Front, the situation for the Entente was dire. The Germans had managed to push the British 200 miles from Mons in Belgium to the outskirts of Paris, and they were pushing the French to their capital. It seemed the prediction of a quick war that most had thought possible was coming true. The German advance into France was being commanded by Helmuth von Moltke, who, despite having great success on the Western Front, realized his troops had been marching for 33 days straight. Their supply lines had been far overextended, and he brought the retreating French army close to their own supply lines, where they could finally replace much-needed munitions and troops. The French commanders Joseph Joffre and Joseph Gallieni both noticed that Moltke didn't go straight for Paris. Instead, he swerved to encircle the French armies near the Marne River. This was the break that the French and British were looking for. 4 German armies, 900,000 strong, are faced off against 3 French armies and 1 British army. However, von Moltke was cut off by the northern sector of the Marne River, and so the army on the right was sent to support the army cut off by the river, causing a gap to open up between the 2 German armies. The British, seeing the opportunity to outflank the enemy, cautiously advanced through the gap. If this gap had never opened up, Germany would have been able to win the war. At this point, French General Joseph Gallieni introduced one of the most unorthodox methods of military transportation at the time: the taxicab. All Paris taxicabs assembled and drove men to the front lines, most of which had never driven in an automobile before, and best of all, the cab drivers had their meters running for the entirety of their service. On the 8th of September 1914, now over 1 million men strong, the tide was finally turning in the favor of the Entente. The French had captured a small town along the Marne River as they continued to advance, and the British were well into the gap they had advanced into. The Germans had retreated a full 100 kilometers from the Marne and were well near the Ain River. Von Moltke told the Kaiser that he had lost the war and was removed from his position. Near the Ain River, the Germans chose to bunker down at a ridge and defend as their army was exhausted. On September 14th, British commander John French gave the order to entrench, and the Germans followed suit. This was the start of trench warfare on the Western Front. However, the Germans managed to pick the best spots for defense first, and many of their positions were overlooking the British ones. German machine gun fire and artillery would tear the attacking British forces to pieces, and the same would happen to the attacking Germans, so they decided it was a better idea to attack the flanks. This is where both armies would try to outflank each other and eventually reach the northern Belgian Sea, and would result in the trench system that would stretch from the North Belgian coast through northern France and stopping at the Swiss border. One town in Belgium called Ypres and the surrounding area would be known as Flanders, which would involve the muddiest and bloodiest battles of the Western Front, and where the Germans would mount a large offensive on the 19th of October, attacking with a total of over 5 million men. The British and French, over 4 million men strong, would have to defend the Ypres salient, which was a bulge that could be attacked from 3 sides. What continued was a month of constant attacking and defending from both sides from their trenches. Over 200,000 Belgians would be killed, 60,000 Frenchmen wounded or killed, and 8,000 British killed in a month of fighting. Every attack from both sides was unsuccessful, but every defense was met with overwhelming success. This was a war that favored the defenders. The technology for killing had far outweighed the technology for self-preservation. The battle ended on the 30th of November 1914 and would be considered inconclusive, unlike the Marne, which was a clear-cut victory for the Entente. What would result for the remainder of the year was complete and total stalemate on the Western Front. The war of motion became static, and it seemed it would not all be over by Christmas. But Christmas miracles were out of the question, as on the 25th of December 1914, the guns fell silent as troops from both sides met in no man's land for a moment of peace. Items like cigarettes, cheese, chocolates, and buttons were exchanged. Troops gave each other haircuts, and even a soccer match was played between the British and Germans, resulting in a German victory. The truce wasn't an isolated incident, as all throughout the Western Front, Allied troops and German troops all met and shared in a moment of peace. However, many of the generals, while they were at their dinner tables with expensive Christmas dinners and expensive aged liquor, got word of this and were outraged and disagreed heavily with the fraternization, and ordered the troops to return to their trenches at once. The truce was over. This would be the last time soldiers would engage in a truce of this magnitude, and from now on, combat was the only time these men would have the displeasure of meeting one another.